Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Emily, and welcome to the Solent Sessions podcast.
This is a show where we explore our minds, chat about lived experiences, and hear the powerful stories of real people living real lives.
From conversations with wellbeing experts and people in the community, we'll learn what it really means to be your own best friend.
We won't hold back though, and we'll be having some of those real, raw, and sometimes difficult conversations to help raise awareness in the world of wellbeing. So let's dive right in. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. And I really mean that. We use that phrase a lot, but I really want to throw out a good morning or good evening, wherever you are. I hope it's been productive or restful, active or passive, whatever you need from today. And if not, what are you going to make sure you build in tonight, tomorrow, this week that will help you get there?
Welcome to the Solent podcast. It feels so great to get this started and ready to go. We are not alone today either. Myself and Dan are joined by the fantastic Hazel Anderson-Turner, Business Psychologist and Coach, and we are discussing self-love and kindness, and what a poignant time to do so. So hello, Hazel. It's lovely to have you on.
Hello. Lovely to be here.
How are you today?
I'm not bad. I've got a break from homeschooling, so all is well.
Nice distraction, I hope.
Definitely.
So, could we sort of delve into more about you and your background and sort of what you do day to day?
Yeah, so I specialise in leadership and resilience, and my background is quite strongly in the public sector. So I worked at Hampshire County Council for many years, and then we joined up with Fire and Police Service. And I, like many people, worked really hard. I pushed myself. I wanted to do, good things. I wanted to achieve things. I wanted to make a difference to people. And just kept pushing and pushing. And after many years, I ended up really burnt out. After that happened, I tried everything. I mean, I was a psychologist, so, there's part of me saying, Hazel, you should have known better. But I tried everything. And then it felt really important to me to share what I'd learned. So I guess that's where my specialism came from, was that I think because I'd really struggled with my own mind. I had this tendency to be incredibly hard on myself, and ended up, really not in a resilient space. And that's why it's become really important to me to talk about things like self-love, compassion, and also, how to stay resilient in a very challenging context that we're faced with.
Amazing. Self-love and compassion is the reason why we're here and talking to you today, Hazel. The podcast is sort of tying into our Love Your Smile campaign, and I'll talk a little bit about that for everybody that's listening. So our Love Your Smile campaign is a self-compassion campaign around practicing self-love and positivity. Obviously, that's really important at the minute that we do this for ourselves because we're going through such a difficult time. It aims to encourage people to notice and share the little things that they do to make themselves smile throughout the day, empowering them to think and speak compassionately about themselves whilst inspiring others to do the same. Speaking from experience, I know that I used to find it quite difficult to practice self-love. I'm the first person to be compassionate to other people, but not always compassionate to myself. So I really do try and sort of sit with my feelings and try and notice those times where I'm not being kind to myself and sort of flip it on its head, just so that I am giving myself those sort of affirmations that I'm good enough, that, do you know what, I do actually love my smile, I do love myself, and it doesn't come easy, but the more you do it, I feel the easier it gets. There was a quote that I saw years and years and years ago, and it's really stuck with me. And it was, she was no lamb, she was a lion. And when I do have those feelings of negativity, I sort of try and remind myself of that quote and sit with that quote and be like, no, do you know what? I am strong. I can do this. And then, give myself 5 minutes and I can get on with the day. So I didn't know if you had anything particular, Hazel, that you do that makes you sort of think about how you speak to yourself or how you give yourself self-compassion.
Yeah, like you, it took me a long time to work out kind of what self-compassion, self-love was. People used to say to me, stop being so hard on yourself, be kinder to yourself. And, I'd nod at them and kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and do that. But I honestly had no idea how to do that. So the way that I'd motivated myself, for years and years, and I had achieved stuff, through that way of motivation was by being hard on myself. And I think when we're thinking about how to be more compassionate to ourselves, I think a bit like you've done, actually recognizing that for me, it's the absence of self-judgment and self-criticism rather than, it is about adding some stuff in as well. And we'll talk about that hopefully a bit later, but the absence of that self-criticism. And there's a great question actually from Paul Gilbert's work. So he wrote The Compassionate Mind, and he asks us to question: am I giving myself shame-focused criticism or compassion-focused self-correction?
Wow.
Which is a bit of a mouthful. So I change it in my mind to: is this a time for criticism or for coaching? Obviously with my background as a coach, because when you're coaching someone, you are, there is an absence of judgment. There is a kind of a positive regard for that person. So if I can get myself into that, way of being with myself, as well as when I'm in, coaching other people, that feels like a positive way forward rather than getting stuck in criticism. And also I think it's really interesting to think about what like self-compassion actually is. And Kristen Neff, who is kind of one of the leading researchers in self-compassion, she talks about it having 3 components. And I think this is really, really interesting. So the first is self-kindness. The second is recognition of our common humanity. And the third is mindfulness. And put those together, and that's where you can get to a place of self-compassion. So when I combine those for myself, I'm able to recognize, so I'm able to, I think a bit like you were saying, I'm able to let myself, recognize that I'm suffering, like this is painful, this is a tricky, moment for me. And then know that being imperfect and feeling that sense of suffering because we made a mistake or we've upset someone in our minds, that's part of being human. So recognizing that we're not alone in that, we're not the only ones walking around being imperfect all the time, and then making the choice to be kind to ourselves. And I think that's the key. So firstly, noticing, allowing ourselves to feel our own feelings, then recognize that it's not just us, that's part of being human, and then do something kind for ourselves.
So obviously we hear about self-love a lot, and we and certainly this day and age, it's something that I think is spoken about a lot, but often it's spoken about from ourselves to other people. And I think it's one of those advices, as we've kind of mentioned already from our experiences, it's almost that oxygen mask on first kind of approach. And I think it's one of those things that putting it into practice is so difficult, I think, for many people. And obviously in this current climate, and certainly off the back of how crazy this last year has been through COVID and certainly the pandemic, I don't know how important is kindness to each other and ourselves. And obviously there's been quite a few studies over the years for kindness and civility and compassion within the workplace, and certainly its relationship with safety. But how, on a practical level, do you show yourself and others love and compassion whilst at work? Because obviously it's a bit of a different environment. And I wonder, Hazel, if you've got any top tips that you could tell people about in the workplace, because it is a different environment to, say, our own home and the safety that kind of that holds for some people.
Yeah, and I think safety is a really good word for, I think, understanding why we might find it harder in this time, because we know that when we're under pressure and we're feeling under threat or unsafe, our minds are programmed to prioritize survival, and we can get really caught inside our heads, and the uncertainty can cause us to go to worst case scenario predictions. And we know that the stress hormone cortisol suppresses oxytocin, which is that, the nice cuddle hormone, that one that connects us to other people. And there's this really fascinating research study about trainee priests. So it was set up to see whether they would help a collapsed man who was on a path on their way to a lecture. And if the priest thought they had lots of time to get to the lecture, 63% stopped and helped the man. And if they were told they were late for the lecture, only 10% stopped. And these are trainee priests, so we think they'd be kind of, self-compassion would be at the front of their mind. But I just think that, when we feel pressure, we can go into that tunnel vision, a bit like those priests, kind of focused on getting to the lecture on time. And I think we can find that in our working day, and that kindness to others can be harder because our minds are really focused on our own survival. What I think is really interesting is that kindness can be really, really helpful then, as in that those acts release oxytocin and therefore can, help combat that. So, if you're rushed off your feet and someone makes you a cup of tea, it can be like the best gift of the day, can't it? Or if you snap at someone and instead of them getting defensive, they ask you if you're okay. And to me, those little acts of kindness that, if we're able to make a bit of space in our minds to do that for each other, I think they say, I see you, and I'm here for you. And I think that's the interesting thing about compassion, as in being different from empathy. So compassion says, I feel your suffering, I see your suffering, I feel it, and I want to help. And that's the bit for me, is how we can make that space to do that for others. And I think one of the most compassionate things that we can do for each other is to listen to each other without judgment or trying to fix. So when someone just needs to I just need to talk and someone to hear me. I often say in my training, the best gift that you can give someone is your attention. And I know it's really hard when you're really, really busy, but when you do make that time for someone, it can be just incredibly powerful.
And I suppose it's not only powerful for the person receiving that attention, but it's also, inherently powerful for the person giving that attention. As when we think, I always said this about the acts of well-being, and the one that really struck me was giving, and that, a lot of people will immediately revert in their brain to charity and be like, well, if I give to charity, I'm sure my well-being will be great. But in the aspect of giving your time and yourself and a bit of your day, if you will, minute, hour, whatever that may be, to intently help someone, it not only affects that person, but also physiologically almost affects yourself as well through that act of, and you can learn bits,
I really found that what you just said there, Hazel, it's not always trying to fix people's problems. You can't sort of solve everything for them in 5 minutes. It's just them knowing that they can come to you, that they have, your confidence, they can just talk to you, and, it might lead them to solving whatever problem they have, just speaking about it. And I think we all really need to be, especially with like maybe body language at work. Now we wear masks and things, it's still trying to portray that you're still open for everybody. What is it that I think a lot of people have said, like, love isn't cancelled, as we're living in our houses at the minute and we can't go and do things, we can't see people like we normally do, love isn't cancelled, compassion isn't cancelled, all these things, we can still continue to be there for people, and now it's even more important than ever.
I was thinking, I was reflecting back on my coachees, that I've been working with in Solent for the last year. and, you know, some of the challenges that they face, because I thought that might be helpful to share some of that during this podcast. And, you know, for a lot of people, we look for value outside of ourselves. So if we look for that validation for someone, you know, and when someone praises us, it's like, oh, that's made my day. And then when we get criticized, or we feel like we've made a mistake and we criticize ourselves, then it's like we're on this roller coaster. And you know, I work with quite a few clients around, you know, taking time each week or each day just to reflect on what's gone well, you know, what you're proud of, what you've learned, and really strengthening their ability to really trust themselves and their own evaluation rather than getting on that roller coaster. And I feel like that's part of this, you know, ability to show yourself love, is to recognize the positive things that we do, because I think often we're programmed to look for the things that are wrong. I mean, that's the kind of the way that our brain keeps us safe, is let's, you know, look for the threats and look for the things that we haven't done right. And there's something about retraining ourselves to notice the good stuff. And when we're writing it down at the end of the day, during the day, our minds are looking out for it, because we're starting to do that retraining, which I think can be really powerful. And another thing that I have noticed is about how people manage their time and energy. So I think often we feel really powerless to our schedules, and we start the day and just firefight for the whole day, and then end up, you know, exhausted on the sofa at the end of the day, watching Netflix and scrolling through our phones, eating chocolate. That's me. And I think I've worked with, you know, quite a few people on stepping back and working out those small changes that they can make to their schedule, the things that they actually do have some control over, in order to give themselves some space to be compassionate. Because I think when we're on that, you know, the treadmill, when we are just in firefighting mode, it's really difficult to, you know, take that step back. We are just kind of constantly meeting other people's needs, you know, and going from one challenge to the other. So having that space to step back and think, okay, right, what if I rearranged it so I could have at least half an hour at the start of the day to plan what I need to do? Or, you know, how do I get that walk? How do I get that, you know, how do I fit a break in? How do I get some fresh air in my day? And I think that can be really powerful. And I had a lovely quote from one of my coaches who, at the end of working together, said, I finally realized it's not that I'm failing, it's that I just haven't found the right process yet. And I thought that was really powerful, because if we just feel like we're firefighting the whole time, we're not setting ourselves up to be able to be compassionate. So we're kind of on a back foot from the start.
And I wonder whether there's been quite a few different dynamics, you know, within COVID itself. Obviously, it's presented us with such an odd, reflective year, I suppose. I mean, we are a year now, obviously, since it started really heating up. And obviously, we've gone through these cycles, haven't we? We recognize this period of time where we've almost had this heightened level of compassion for everybody else, you know, and this heroic phase that we kind of went through. And we've kind of got to the stage now where, you know, right at the start of what you were talking about there, Hazel, around the almost hierarchy of things that get us through the day and the hierarchy of needs, and that level of when we go down, you kind of think, well, the first thing to go will be probably being kind to ourselves. Then hopefully the second thing will be being kind to others, you know, and that accessibility. But that it is interesting, you know, at the moment we are now, which is that really elongated period of time. There's a lot of kind of tiredness and just wanting, you know, disenfranchisement, I suppose, to this whole thing. I wonder whether that's having such a big impact on people's ability to build in that time, or see that is a priority to build in that time, you know?
I think, like you say, going from that survival mode to just fatigue. I think it's not just cognitive fatigue, it's emotional fatigue, it's, you know, physical fatigue. And I think then it becomes, we can feel quite stuck. So it becomes harder to make those positive steps. And I think that's when it becomes really important. And I think, you know, I would say that working with a coach can help, but having a space that you can step back and say, okay, right, I've been on a treadmill, I've been on survival mode. Now I just need to reflect on how might I need to rebalance some things, what might I need to bring in. And I think starting really small with that is really, really important. So we know that we can start to create positive momentum. So it's a bit like avoiding the New Year's resolution thing, you know, where we show up and we're like, oh, we're going to be doing yoga and we're going to be eating, drinking smoothies and, you know, not eating sugar. And then after day 3, it's like, oh no, this is not working. I'm just going to give up on all of it. I think that's the time when those little things can start to build momentum. So just finding one little thing that you want to change. So, I mean, it sounds crazy, doesn't it? But how many people have I worked with around taking a lunch break, so just taking some kind of break away from their screen in the middle of the day, and you know, getting some fresh air, getting out of the house, even if it's, you know, just 10 minutes, or out of the building that they're in, just being able to break from that screen. It's, you know, I think it's one of those things that when you sit back and you go, well, that makes absolute sense that we need to create a break in the day. We know that we can't perform, you know, just keep performing and performing and performing through the day. We know that. And yet it's really, really hard, isn't it? I think once we're on that, when we're in that place of just keep going, just keep your head above water, it's really, really hard to stop and think, actually, this isn't working.
Do you think there's an element, and I'm going super off piste here, sorry, Ems and Hazel, but we've seen a lot over this, over the pandemic, specifically the pandemic, around, you know, all the messaging around frontline or not frontline and all of this kind of messaging that creates this sense, I suppose, of you know, guilt and shame in some people, that they feel that perhaps, you know, certainly, you know, I've felt that in the past, that, you know, you're almost creating that whip for yourself to be able to say, well, because I'm not, say, on a COVID ward wearing PPE for 13, 14 hours, it's almost the expectation that you set on yourself to do that, you know, and actually self-care is almost not even on the table at that point, because for that very reason of, well, why do I deserve that? And I wonder whether there's that sense of guilt and shame where we just don't prioritize ourselves because we feel guilty that there are other people off in a worse environment than us.
I mean, that definitely that comes up for me. You know, sat in my office when I'm coaching people who are definitely, you know, facing more challenges than me, and I know it comes up, you know, for the coaches that I'm working with. I guess, you know, the way that I've got over it for myself is to think that, I mean, one, it shows that I care. So I think there's something about seeing a benefit in it. I can't, and if I have a value, so one of my values is love. If I have a value of love, I have to accept that it's going to be painful to see other people struggling. And I think in the last year, it's been brought to our attention, hasn't it, that, you know, when we see a frontline worker and the risk that they're taking, like you say, we can get those feelings of guilt and shame. But I think what's really interesting is that there is always inequality. There are always people who are doing more than us. It's really interesting, this comparison thing, isn't it? Because we think about comparison as being a negative, because often we, you know, social media, we see other people with, you know, fitter bodies, better lives, more money, and we know that kind of comparison isn't good for us. But it's really interesting, isn't it? Then we compare ourselves to someone who's we perceive is giving more than us, and so we're falling short there. It's getting into the comparison trap, I think, is really, really kind of damaging for ourselves. And when I'm working with people, what I'm really interested about is their values. So rather than comparing yourself on these kind of arbitrary levels, going, okay, right, these are my values. Am I living by them? Am I doing everything that I can to be that person that I really want to be? Is there something else I could be doing, or actually, am I living in a way that reflects what's important to me? And as part of that, I think, with this comparison with other people who are, if you perceive they're doing more during COVID, is that bit of, it doesn't serve them for you to work crazy hours and make yourself sick. You're not helping them by doing stuff which lowers your immune system, ultimately, and possibly puts you at risk. So there's something for me about that bit, recognizing that getting caught in a comparison trap isn't that helpful.
Like you say, Hazel, so many of us just fall into it all the time, always comparing, always thinking there's something we need to be doing. And sometimes we just need to stop and think, actually, I'm okay as I am. I'm okay as I am. I'm not going to fall into this trap of negativity or thinking that I need to do more. I need to be comfortable with myself as I am right now before I can sort of do anything else, before I overfill and overexert in a bid to feel better about myself, because 9 times out of 10 it doesn't really happen.
Absolutely. And if we're all falling over, that it's not going to help anybody. And I think that there is, and again, I think it's that balance, isn't it? So if you are feeling this big draw to, I feel like I need to do more, then have a look round. So rather than try and work crazy hours and just really, really push yourself, actually look around and think, where would my energy be best served? So is it a bit of volunteering over here? Is it, like you say, actually, I've got a mate who I know is having a really hard time. I'm going to make sure I send them a message every day. Or, that I don't think self-compassion is always that kind of, I need to just say to myself, I'm okay as I am. I think there's this it's both of them. I think, like we were saying at the start, this difference between, being critical and being a coach, rather than sitting that place of going, oh, I just don't feel like I'm doing enough. Maybe there are some little things you can do. Maybe there is a bit more, but I don't need it. I don't need to do those things in order to feel okay about myself. I do those things because it feels like the right thing to do. And that's quite a different place to be in. And again, that's about your value coming from yourself. You're going, I'm okay as I am. I'm feeling like, I am living by my values. I'm living in a way that reflects what's important to me. And I'm going out and doing a bit of these things because it feels like the right thing to do, rather than, I think, like kind of Emily was talking about, where I feel like I need to do that to stop me feeling guilty. And that doesn't feel good, does it? That doesn't feel like a place that we want to be in.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, referring back to sort of that love and self-compassion and how we show it to ourselves, obviously the Love Your Smile campaign, we're actually sort of tying it into the biggest love day, and I'm saying that in inverted commas, Valentine's Day. You can't see me do the hand gesture, but I'm doing it. That it's not about sort of showing love on one particular day to another person. Obviously, we do that anyway. It's a holiday that we've been sort of ingrained to do, but that can also be quite triggering for some people as well, that they feel like they need to do something or they're left out on that particular day. So it's sort of how we can sort of think about that day and recognizing that we do in fact love ourselves and what we can do to show ourselves that kind of love on that one particular day, and sort of how we can not feel so inclined to do it for 24 hours rather incorporating it into our lives.
Yeah, and I think it'd be great, wouldn't it, if we did it for ourselves for a day and then we thought, oh, actually, I quite like this, and we did find ways to incorporate it. I think, if as an activity, I think this would be really nice, wouldn't it? Actually, if you designed a day for yourself which was all about loving yourself, what would that look like? And maybe it's that you think, what would be the nicest thing that I could do first thing in the morning? For me, sometimes, I have this routine that I go out and I walk around the field near my house and hopefully see the sunrise in the morning. And that's just, it sets me up really nicely for the day. And then other days it's, I just love a cup of tea and read a book. Maybe it's something about actually taking the time to make yourself breakfast rather than just grabbing something on the go. I'm a big fan of meditation. So maybe starting the day in that, actually, I'm going to sit and be with myself for 10 minutes. I'm going to give myself 10 minutes where I don't have to be anything for anyone else. And I'm just going to be with myself and practice something that I know is going to help me during the day. So something about that.
As soon as you said meditation, I was like, bing, I'm off. But I wonder for me, there's that piece of really fundamentally understanding mindfulness as well, which I think so many people are kind of lacking those fundamentals in that understanding, and certainly around some of the stuff you mentioned there around going for that walk, watching that sunrise, eating, spending time with yourself, meditation. There's so many stuff that we do that we know resets our energy, that is mindful and truly mindful, and I think it's one of those things, breathing, big fan of breathing, as we all are, but a big fan of obviously controlling breathing and understanding what that feels like and being in the moment. And I think a lot of the time people get stuck in this trap of the minute someone says mindfulness or meditation, they kind of roll their eyes. But actually, fundamentally, it's so good for you. And it's so not only good for your mental health, but your physical health as well, to really focus on those moments, and I couldn't advocate enough for just delving into the worlds of meditation and mindfulness, because it really is the purest form of self-love and self-worth, of being able to say that I'm going to spend time really reconnecting with mind and body.
No, I agree. And I think, there is that eye roll thing, isn't there? I think because it's been, it was a bit faddish, I think, at a time. And I think that's really sad because, a lot of the people that I work with, they are spending nearly all of their time giving to others in some way or another. And I think, whether it is practicing everyday mindfulness, so being in that moment, either with another person, really recognizing that, this is a real moment of connection, so I'm going to make sure I'm here, not in my mind worrying about what's coming next, or whether it is that just that space to hear your own self, and I don't mean your own thinking mind that's getting into that kind of problem solving survival bit, but how do we create a space to really hear, the inner kind of wisdom? I don't want to get too spiritual, but that kind of that instinctive part of us who's and I think that connection with the body, saying, do you know what, I'm not feeling quite right today, or I've just got a feeling about something. And I think creating a bit of space to be able to hear that part of us is really, really important. And I think, I love meditation because it's got so many positives around, that it helps us to train our brains to click out of that thinking survival mind and get into a kind of a much more peaceful space. But also for compassion, we know that the evidence around the loving kindness meditation, which is a meditation which is about sending out positive feelings to others, to ourselves, to those that we are having challenges with, and to kind of everyone. We know that meditation practice in particular is really powerful around helping to increase levels of compassion, and can really, and I thought was really interesting, can help people who are in caring industries who are doing a lot of that. You can get that compassion fatigue because you're having to give so much to others, can really help with that. So I think, if you haven't given meditation a go, then that's definitely one to have a look at if you're thinking, I need to be a bit kinder to myself. And
And I suppose it sets you up, doesn't it, for like, as you kind of mentioned there around like the loving and kindness meditation, almost because you're having those moments of focused attention when you need it the most, which is those moments where you don't have time in that sense. You've created almost, you trained yourself in that way, and you've trained yourself that actually, I've always said, the support networks goes beyond people. It goes on all of the things that we set ourselves up for, whether that's apps, whether that's meditation, whether that's mindfulness, whether that's various different parts of mental wellness, I suppose. But it's those moments where you need it the most, which is cruelly the moments you usually can't, subjectively think about that. And you just need to just have a go-to. And sometimes that's where, certainly for me anyway, and my mental health, that's the power of really dedicating some time to learning the fundamentals and learning some of where your mind goes sometimes, because it can be really interesting to do that in a safe environment for when you need it the most. You can call upon those kind of techniques, if you will, even if it, as I said, even if it is just base level breathing, square breathing, and just getting yourself recentered.
Definitely. And I think in those moments, when we think, oh, we know when we catch ourselves, doing the old I ams, or I've messed up. If we're doing the stuff, we can catch our minds doing that. I think, like you say, just being able to take a breath and to notice that that's happening. And, we often talk about autopilot. So it's like we are designed to be these autopilot doing machines, and we just keep on that track of doing, and our minds are kind of throwing stuff at us, just, criticism to motivate us and keep us safe. And I think there's something about, being able to take a breath, being able to take a moment where we kind of break out of the trance, and we are able to then create that bit of space to have a choice, and we recognize that there's a choice here. So I can keep going with what I'm doing, or do you know what? I'm just going to go and take a walk around the block. I'm going to have a cup of tea. I'm going to go and call a friend. And we're able to say, what do I actually need right now?
And I wonder whether it's being it's twofold, isn't it, as well, that you have that moment of being proud when you retrospectively look back at those moments as well, that you could do that and you took time to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, isn't it? I think when we've got choices, because actually say when we stop and go, oh, actually, what do I need right now? Sometimes that makes it harder, doesn't it? In some ways, it's easier to stay in autopilot. It's easier. That's what we used to. We used to just keep going, keep your head down, push through, put your feelings in a box, all of this type of stuff. And in a way, I know it sounds harsh, but it's easier because we're trained to do it. It's harder to retrain and say, I'm going to choose something else. I'm going to choose, role modeling what it looks like to show yourself love. And I think I work a lot. So a lot of my clients have children. And, one of the things that I discovered was quite powerful was working with them around what they wanted to role model to their children. So I'd say to them, what is it that you want your children to learn most of all, from you? And they'd be like, oh, to accept yourself exactly how you are, and to just love yourself how you are, and to feel your own value. And I said, great. So you're telling them that? And they like, yeah, I'm telling them that. And I'm like, brilliant. What are you showing them? Because children can smell, the rubbish. They can see the difference between what you say and what you do for yourself. So if you're saying to them, love yourself, and then you are totally neglecting your own needs, you are not living self-love. And I think finding a reason, whatever that reason is, to love yourself. I love it that you love yourself just because that's how it should be. But for some people, just that kind of wake up call of, oh wow, I'm keeping this going. If I'm not showing it to the people who matter to me how you do it, then I'm just going to keep the autopilot thing going, and they're going to end up exactly the same as me, struggling with being able to love themselves.
You know what? We've had such a brilliant conversation today, and Hazel, thank you so much for doing this. I know Dan will agree. This is
absolutely.
This is what a fabulous way to kick off And yeah, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for coming on. We hope you have enjoyed yourself on here. We haven't put you too much under the spotlight.
No, it's been great.
But yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Dan, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just, again, want to extend the thanks, Hazel. It's really made me think, and I'm sure it will make other people think about things. And at very least, you know, they've got 30 minutes plus to sit and hopefully hear some of the messages that you've put forward today, because I think it's really important. And this can be their act of self-love and give them the opportunity to listen to this. That isn't just promoting this so more people listen, but it is there's a twofold there. But
shameful, Dan, shameful.
I am. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Hazel. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.